Guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Saturday, September 26th, 2020, and today we're going to be talking about 4 battleground states that likely won't be called on election night. So 538 released this article today talking about 4 states in particular that you can actually see on this graphic right here. You can see that the states of Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, and North Carolina all have election rules where they're able to accept ballots if they are postmarked by election day. Obviously, the mail may be slowed down. We're looking at least 60 million votes cast estimated by mail. So what we're going to see is the possibility of the mail slowing down and coming later than election day, which means a ballot very well could have been submitted on November 3rd. And in some states, it's allowed if it's postmarked by November 3rd and then can be counted later on through the election. So let's take a look at these 4 states in particular. So Pennsylvania, the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania ruled that ballots can arrive as late as November 6th and still count as long as no evidence exists that they were mailed after election day. In Michigan, a state judge decreed that ballots can be counted as long as they're postmarked by the day before the election, November 2nd, and received by November 17th. In Wisconsin, a federal judge ordered to count absentee ballots that are postmarked by November 3rd as long as they arrive by November 9th. And in North Carolina, they reached a tentative court settlement with plaintiffs that, among other things, would allow ballots to count as long as they were postmarked by November 3rd and arrive by November 12th. Doesn't fully go into effect yet, but still, it is pretty likely that it does. So these 4 states, well, why are we talking about them? Some other states may have similar ballot rules. Well, we know how a lot of the other states are going to vote. This is my current election prediction as it stands today. We have 233 electoral votes for Trump, 244 for Biden. Now, Trump was only expected to carry North Carolina out of the yellow states, but you can see that if the election was at a point where these 4 states were not called on election night, and not to say that all the other states will be called on election night, it is very possible that they are drawn out throughout the week, but if we see ballots start to come in day after day, we won't know how many ballots are officially submitted on election night if they are received by the 6th or by the 17th or by the 9th in some of these states. So these 4 states in particular really are going to show the direction of the country. And I really think that the Democratic Party should be hoping that they will be up on election night, but not too worried if Trump is either. What we're going to see is the Democratic Party sending in a number of mail-in ballots compared to the Republican Party. The Democratic Party has pretty much been in full-fledged support of mail-in voting, whereas Donald Trump has been almost in firm opposition to it, except for some battleground states. What we've seen from the Democratic Party in terms of polls is that most of them, or a plurality of them, will be submitting their mail completely by mail. Another portion will be filling out an absentee ballot and dropping it off in person, and then the rest will be voting in person. The overwhelming majority of Republican Party voters have said that they will be voting in person. This is likely due to the difference in the COVID-19, scare. It's a pandemic, but the Republican Party seems to be a lot less afraid of COVID-19 compared to the Democratic Party. Donald Trump and a number of Republican governors have started opening up states altogether with the approval of President Trump being praised for it, but realistically, it just is going to endanger a number of people. I don't think that's a partisan thing to say either. We're talking about Florida, which had the most COVID-19 death cases. Okay, that's rude. Hey, Google, stop. So pretty much in Florida particularly, they had the most COVID-19 cases back yesterday, literally yesterday, the most COVID-19 deaths in the entire country. And then now they're reopening restaurants fully. Ron DeSantis is doing very poor in terms of his approval. So a lot of people are viewing the handling of the coronavirus very negatively from these Republican governors, but then a lot of the Republican voters do approve of the way that the governor is handling the situation. And that definitely just has to go with the fact that the Democratic Party took COVID-19 extremely seriously. Some may argue too seriously. The Republican Party didn't necessarily act on it too heavily. I mean, we've seen foreign countries, they're still locked down. And yes, we do have to, at some point, return to a sense of normalcy, but that's not possible. I mean, we're going to be wearing masks till at least 2021. We won't be having, group events until mid-2021. There won't be a convention, again, if this type of thing happens. So what we're seeing now is that there's a very clear divide between who believes COVID-19 is a real threat versus who doesn't. And that's exactly what's going to be the determining factor as to who votes in person. Because you can't imagine an elderly Democrat voting in person when they run the risk of dying from COVID-19 from that vote, which is exactly why it's very clear that the tactics in some of these states preventing COVID-19 from being a valid excuse on the absentee ballot, that's close to voter suppression, if not voter suppression. Because there are older voters who very well could die from being exposed to COVID-19, very well could die from being exposed to COVID-19 because they have a pre-existing condition or not. I mean, it's not impossible to die without a pre-existing condition. And while you personally may not believe COVID-19 is a real threat, we've seen it nationally. We've seen it. We've seen over 200,000 deaths in this country, 200,000 American deaths to a pandemic. And I'm not trying to assign the blame to any one elected official, but I will say that COVID-19 is a very real threat, and everyone should be allowed to submit an absentee ballot because of COVID-19. And the fact big states like Texas are prohibiting that, yeah, I mean, that's very close to voter suppression. But I think that what we will see on election night is the Democratic Party running behind. We will see the Republican Party leading in the initial vote count. Now, I don't think that news media will project, I don't think they'll project Arizona red immediately because mail-in ballots still need to be counted. And I don't think that they will say, you know what, Donald Trump has won the election, and then all of a sudden, a week later, saying Joe Biden will win the election. I think they're going to wait, and we will see a lot of yellow states on CNN or on Fox News or on MSNBC on election night. But these 4 states in particular, we really need the results very quickly because what we see in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, these were the 3 trying states for Hillary Clinton. I mean, they flipped from being Democratic states for 24 to 28 years, depending on the state you're looking at, to the Republican Party for the first time in 2016. And that was very substantial. And the Democratic Party has been looking to this region to regain their vote share. And what we've seen across these other states, even if all the other states are counted, if we're waiting till November 17th to get Michigan results, if we're waiting till the 9th to get North Carolina results, we may not have an election winner. Because based off my prediction, which is what I'm going to go with for right now, we see Biden and Trump, neither of them reach 270. Biden would have to carry Florida on election night in order to win and reach 270, which isn't too far out of the question. Donald Trump is narrowly leading here. It's not completely out of the way for Joe Biden. But let's say Trump carries Florida, right? Let's say Trump carries Georgia and Ohio and Iowa and Texas, but Joe Biden holds on to the Clinton states and Arizona. That's why the Rust Belt is so crucial. Because with the Rust Belt, Biden wins the election. With the Rust Belt, Trump wins the election. So we're going to be in a limbo where we're going to be seeing these 61 electoral votes to a point where the candidates are at a pretty close position. Now, if Joe Biden does do very well on the electoral map and he's able to outperform his numbers that he currently holds, he could possibly win Florida. He could possibly win Ohio. He could possibly win Iowa, which means we wouldn't really need these 4 states in particular. But if Donald Trump is to bring up the issue of voter fraud, it's going to seem to a number of his supporters, they have been interviewed before. I mean, we've seen a number of his supporters say the only way Trump loses is if there's voter fraud. Never a good way to look at the election. But looking at the map now, let's say Trump is leading in Wisconsin, leading in Michigan, leading in Pennsylvania, leading in North Carolina, and then we see an influx of votes come in that were very well could have been postmarked for November 3rd that came in 2-3 days late because the mail was backed up. But when we were talking 60 million votes in the mail, and Donald Trump ends up losing. It starts narrowing down. Biden takes the lead in Wisconsin. Biden takes the lead in Michigan. Biden takes the lead in Pennsylvania, and Trump retains his lead in North Carolina. People are going to call voter fraud. They are going to say that the Democratic Party, stacked ballots. They sent them in late. They lied and said they were postmarked November 3rd. But realistically, I mean, we need to have faith in our electoral process. And never before have we seen so much distrust in the overall way that we cast our ballots because, voter fraud by mail doesn't happen. I mean, there are very, very tiny cases in which it happens. When you see those headlines from Breitbart, when you see them from right-wing media talking about, dead voters voted in the Democratic primary or their ballots were cast out because they were dead, that wasn't voter fraud. They died before their ballot was counted. If you die before an election, your vote doesn't count. That's just how it works because you're no longer living and it's essentially being counted on election day. So it's as if you had voted in person. And those ballots were thrown out. I believe it was in Michigan or Pennsylvania. And when we're talking about that, the entire issue of voter fraud, it's just not going to happen this election. We are not going to see high levels of voter fraud like the president might expect. And honestly, it does seem like a futile effort to say, essentially, he's acknowledging his loss before it has begun. Realistically, what candidate would say the election results are rigged before the election even happens? Think about that. For 1 second, think about, if you don't agree with me on this point, just think about, has there ever really been a time where a candidate has said the election results are rigged before the results come out? Really? We're not seeing any signs of any voter fraud. I really think it's super important for Americans to trust their electoral process. I think it's very important that they know that their vote actually matters and it's not being counteracted by someone who may not actually be voting, or someone voting on their behalf, filling out a fake absentee ballot, because that just doesn't happen in America. We have a very good election process in terms of how safe it is. Now, whether or not it's a true democracy is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about how safe our voting process is. And we've seen very low cases. I mean, 120 million votes cast in 2016 at least. I mean, that's just between the two candidates. We're talking 130 million in total, almost there. And if we're talking about voter fraud, I mean, we're not even talking about 1/1000th of the voting population, even considering voter fraud. I mean, this process has worked time and time again. 1 in 4 voters in 2016 voted by mail. People need to realize that 1 in 4 voters in 2016 voted by mail. 30 million plus votes by mail in 2016. So people should be pretty trusting in what we have now and what's laid out. And while we see votes may be trickling in the final few days of the election or right after the election is held, that makes sense. I mean, we're seeing a huge influx of votes by mail, but it's not like this hasn't been done before. We've seen tens of millions of votes by mail just 4 years ago. So these 4 states, we really need their results quickly, but I completely understand. I think the American electorate will completely understand that people are pressed for time, and, you know, ballots may come in later. But these 61 electoral votes will give us a general idea of who's winning on election night. Because if Biden's leading in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, and possibly North Carolina on election night, it's a done deal. Because mail-in ballots are going to heavily favor the Democratic Party. What we've seen is that they are, the Democratic Party seems to be more inclined to vote by mail, or vote by mail and drop it off in person, than vote in person. And that's largely due to COVID-19, obviously. I mean, we wouldn't be seeing that in a regular election. And while some people may still be voting in person, we're likely to see Donald Trump lead on election night, and then as the mail-in ballots get counted, Joe Biden starts to take a lead. However, in some of these states, I'm thankful for this one, the mail-in ballots have been counted very early. I mean, they get counted very early. In Florida, we will likely see who wins the state itself by 11, 12 a.m. So what we see in Florida and a number of other battleground states is that the ballots have, or the governors or the state legislators have committed to, Secretary of State, not state legislators, have committed to getting the ballots counted very quickly. But at the same time, it is possible that we see in these other remaining 61 electoral votes that, hey, maybe we need to wait a couple more days to get the results. But I really hope we do get results from these states very quickly. They are the states that we've been looking at for the past 4 years. I mean, we've been looking at the Rust Belt. North Carolina and Florida have also been targets for the Democratic Party. And it'll give us a general idea of where the election stands. Because, honestly, we're going to get election updates in the middle of the day while we're at work, while we're in school. And it's going to say Biden officially wins Pennsylvania, or it's going to say Trump officially wins North Carolina. And I honestly think that's probably one of the weirdest type of elections we've seen probably in U.S. history. But again, unprecedented times, right? So final, I guess, map, we're talking 244 electoral votes for Biden, 233 for Donald Trump based off my estimations. The 61 no-call states likely won't be called for the next couple of days following the November 3rd general election. So we probably won't get those results too early, but I'm hoping that we do get a general idea of who's leading in them. That way we can get a general idea of who's going to win the presidency, because this election, I mean, we all know it, can't be drawn on too much longer. It's been long enough already, and this year especially has been long enough already. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord link for you to go ahead and join. Please consider joining as a member on my channel, and check the merchandise out down in the description down below. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2020 election videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.